evening and welcome. I am Amarachi Ubani tonight. Some encouraging remarks from the IMF chief. Christine Lagarde says Nigeria does not need intervention. More reforms in the NNPC. President Muhammadu Buhari sets up what he calls Interministerial Committee to reorganize the corporation. The war against corruption heats up as EFCC arrests the publicity secretary and former national chairman of the People's Democratic Party. And United States President Barack Obama weeps as he unveils new gun control measures for the country.
And on business news tonight, financial experts says the implementation of International Monetary Fund's recommendation is critical to reviving key sectors of Nigeria's economy.
And in sports news, Minister of Youth and Sports demands proper maintenance of sporting facilities across the country in line with international standards.
And from Abuja, I'm Yemise Paye. Minister of Science Ogbonnaya Onu says the government is prepared to evolve scientific methods to detect IEDs.
We begin tonight with a verdict by the International Monetary Fund, which says Nigeria does not need any intervention to survive. The IMF Managing Director, Christine Lagarde, says Nigeria is on the right course when compared to her visit 4 years ago. Ms. Lagarde urged the president to make his economic policies flexible and not strangle the poor. Our business correspondent, Bolaji Akinwale, reports.
This is Ms. Christine Lagarde's second visit to Nigeria in 4 years. This time, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund has come at a time Nigeria's economy needs urgent attention amidst declining oil prices and dwindling revenues. Ms. Lagarde pointed out the need for fiscal discipline to address the impacts.
His fight and his determination to fight corruption and his determination to bring about transparency and accountability at all levels of the economy were very important agenda item and very ambitious goal that need to be delivered upon, which he himself is definitely committed to, as he indicated this morning, and as he inspires his team members. We will be discussing this issue of fiscal discipline, financing, monetary policies, and the degree of flexibility.
Despite Nigeria's leading economic role on the African continent, the IMF boss says a huge gap between the rich and the poor still exists.
Nigeria, while a vibrant and large economy, still has to deal with a lot of poor people, with a lot of inequality, and those two components should certainly be always the drivers of reforms, whether it is looking at subsidies and how they are structured and how they can be phased out, whether it's monetary policy and what flexibility is needed and how no impact it should have on the poor. All of those are ambitions that we completely recognize and support.
Although the IMF boss says Nigeria doesn't need any intervention from the institution, she, however, notes that the fund is interested in the program of President Muhammadu Buhari.
We discussed the challenges ahead stemming from the oil price reduction, the necessity to apply fiscal discipline, and the need to also respond to the population needs by addressing the medium-term necessity of improving competitiveness of Nigeria, and yet also focusing on the short-term fiscal situation, which requires that revenue sources be identified in order to compensate the shortfall resulting by the oil price decline. We are not into program negotiations. And frankly, at this point in time, given the determination and resilience displayed by the President and his team, I don't see why an IMF program would be needed.
Ms. Christine Lagarde's visit to Nigeria goes beyond assessing the country's economic strength. The IMF says it has taken a step further to ensure that the state of the economy impacts positively on neighboring countries. Bolaji Akinwale, the Channels Television News.
And one of those who's been vocal about the visits of the IMF chief is the Managing Director of Financial Derivatives, Mr. Bismarck Rawani. Welcome to the News at 10.
Good evening.
So the IMF Managing Director, Christine Lagarde, said that the organization will not meddle in Nigeria's fiscal plans. Did you see this coming?
The IMF does not meddle. That was the old order in which the IMF was considered an agent of neocolonialism, and associated with actually fostering the agenda of the Western nations. That time is over. What the IMF does now is to provide three types of support for countries. One is financial assistance, the other one is surveillance, and the other one is called the Policy Support Instrument Program. At this point in time, Nigeria is only interested in surveillance, which actually prepares you and endorses your policies so that you go out there to raise money from the international financial markets after having a financial endorsement of the condition, your financial condition, by the IMF, who is considered to be an independent and objective arbiter of financial situations of countries.
And that's what Ms. Lagarde did today. She endorsed the Nigerian economy.
Well, she reiterated what needs to be done. It's up to Nigeria to make up its mind what it has to do. And so what you have to do is to ask yourself, Nigeria is a member of the IMF. It joined in March 1961. It has 0.72% of the special drawing rights. So it is our responsibility of the 188 countries in the world to use the facilities of the IMF for support, for endorsement, and to provide, advice, institution building. And that is what is happening. And if you look at the situation today, amongst the African countries, Nigeria is the only country that is only accessing the surveillance. All other countries, South Africa is doing surveillance and policy support. Ghana is actually having financial assistance and surveillance. Kenya is having financial assistance and surveillance, and Uganda is having policy support and instrument. And then you go back to recent engagements. Ghana has external balance adjustment. Kenya has precautionary motives. Sierra Leone has external balance adjustment, and so on. Now, what were their last recommendations? That you should prepare yourself for the sharp decline in oil, to increase the non-oil sources of revenue, to introduce exchange rate flexibility, and to have an independent price setting mechanism for petroleum products, including subsidies. Now, the real issue is that we have a fiscal issue because our fiscal revenues have declined. We are going to have to borrow. We're thinking of borrowing $4.5 billion. And this is going to happen in the first half of this year. So what I see happening is that the IMF has come. There's the Article 4 review of staff and the management of the Nigerian economy will take place starting on Thursday. So, positively, we think there will be an endorsement. And then we now begin to deal with the key issues of how we raise money to meet the shortfall. Then the million-dollar question is about exchange rate of the naira.
But before you go into that,
yes.
you talked about raising money, that $4.5 billion $4.5 billion that we need. Do you think that we would borrow from the IMF?
No. There's no need to do that. What we are going to raise money from the international capital markets, the Eurobond market, for multilateral agencies, including the World Bank and the African Development Bank. We're going to raise money from the London Club because we have areas of negotiated LCs that have not been paid. We will extend those. We will also raise some money from the banks and the export credit agencies. So, but you don't go and borrow without meeting certain conditions. And one of the first conditions is that the IMF finds you acceptable risk. Then the rating agencies will look at you and see whether the probability of your debt default puts you in a particular category. We are BB minus like most of the other countries. And then we go out there and raise money on a program. We're not going to raise, and it will be tied to specific projects. But the beauty is that you have a leader who is considered to be honest and has integrity. So calling on the people to make sacrifices because we are going to borrow, to intervene, to make sure that economic wealth is converted into economic well-being of the people, which is a key element here. That is what is required, and you will see that there will be alignment between fiscal policy, monetary policy, and our borrowing needs.
Mr. Bismarck Rwani, thank you so much for joining us on the News
Thank you,
at 10.
Amarachi.
And the President, Muhammadu Buhari, had more to do after meeting with the IMF chief. He discussed that his administration plans to establish an inter-ministerial committee to speed up the reorganization and reformation of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. President Muhammadu Buhari explains that this has become inevitable in view of the corruption and abuse of the present structure of the NNPC. He said this during a meeting with the Chief Executive Officer of the International Finance Corporation, Jin Yong Kai, at the presidential villa. Mr. Kai, who's also the vice president of the IFC, praises the president's resolve to reorganize the state oil company, which he says could become Africa's largest. He also lauds the president's achievements since assuming power, pointing out that Nigeria has the opportunity to become highly reputable under President Buhari. Now, away from the IMF visits, Nigerian farmers may begin to access the proposed 300 billion naira agri fund meant as credit facilities for small-scale farmers. The Minister of Agriculture, Chief Audogbe, in an interview with our correspondent, Menga Shiru, says the federal government would ensure the funds are well channeled to those who have genuine interest in farming. Chief Audogbe also discusses that within a year, Nigerians would start enjoying turnover from proceeds of the reforms being in place.
As a government, we do not decide who can get credit or who can't. What we will do is to find out from among the farmers, the young people, who is interested in farming or not, and we have a way of monitoring. And then we have the value chain programs. You want to get into agri, or we've decided that there's going to be a cluster in some location. We know who is going there. We know what they want to grow. We know the soil can sustain it. Because one of the problems between the banker and the borrower is the repayment. Bank money is not free. If they are not sure you can repay, why should they lend to you? And if we are not sure they can repay, why should we encourage them to go into agri?
There seems to be so much heightened pressure on the agri sector as one of the ways to diversify the economy. Does it have the potential to turn in the quick cash and the revenue for Nigerians to feel the dividends of this administration?